Hey, Age Lead Store fans. Today I want to talk about creating a short-term and a long-term follow-up process. So often we're kind of doing one or the other, and we don't really think about how these work together as we get an inbound lead or even a referral for that process. What are the steps that we should be doing in the short term, and what are the steps that we should be doing in the long term to make sure that we're following up and closing every single one of these leads that's possible. Stay tuned, we're going to talk about that in a sec. Okay, we're going to talk about follow-up specifically. And again, when we're following up on leads or any sort of marketing, inbound marketing channel, there is a real opportunity to kind of let these things fall on the floor. Because when we get them in, we're often excited, our sales team's excited to get a new lead. We make some initial contact, or we try to make some initial contact, and then from there, we just don't have a good system for following up and making sure that we're working on that prospect, that lead, until it comes to some final conclusion. That's either a yes, they buy, or a no, and sometimes even the no is kind of something that we may want to continue to nurture as well. So the way I think about this is building a short-term follow-up program and a long-term follow-up program. And I want to go through what each of those will look like. Now, I'm going to give you almost a script here to follow in building out these plans. But again, depending on what your industry is, you will have to tune this a little bit. So it may be a little too aggressive. It may not be aggressive enough, but at least you'll get the flow that I'm looking for when we're building out these programs. And this is literally the framework that I start with every single client that we're building out some sort of follow-up program. So first and foremost, when we're thinking short-term follow-up, I want to actually use as many touch points as possible. So I'm not really throwing anything out of the mix. And even as we go into long-term, there is a tendency for us to just rely on email exclusively and not think about all the different ways that we can touch someone and build a program to reach out to these leads over a longer period of time and create more opportunity for them to convert. So even in the short term, this is what I'm looking to do. So day zero, the moment that I get this contact information, web lead comes in or phone call or however that inbound lead kind of gets to me, maybe I'm actually buying the lead. Maybe actually I'm even taking some consumer data or some aged leads and actually trying to warm them up. The process is really the same, and you want to think in terms of this short-term process. So the best that I can, and sometimes depending on the volume and the scale of your business, you can't do this perfectly, but the best that I can, I want to first try to think about the mindset of the person that is that lead. Where did they come from? What are they expecting? What do they need to happen next when they reached out to you? And then I want to start my short-term follow-up. So day zero, of course, when they come in, which is oftentimes a web form or potentially a phone call, I want to immediately respond to whatever that contact was. And I want to respond in the same channel. So if I get a lead as a direct message on Instagram, my immediate follow-up needs to be on Instagram. Direct message, hey, I'm going to make my first communication there. If I get it through email, I'm going to respond via email. If I get it through a web form, I'm going to respond via email, the web form. If they give me a phone number, I'm going to also respond via the phone as well. Of course, if they called me and left a voicemail, I'm going to respond to the phone call. So that initial response, I want to happen immediately. If I can, I even want to automate it, and I want to stay in the channel that they approached me with. And then at some point, I may migrate to a more efficient channel. If they contacted me on Instagram, I will probably try to make a connection such that we can talk via email and then potentially on the phone. Of course, a lot of what you folks do requires a phone call or discovery or some sort of in-person meeting. And so we definitely want to get to that. But first step, respond as fast as possible, potentially automate it in the channel. Then within 2 to 3 days, if I haven't made an actual meeting appointment or set that or actually had a true conversation, that around that day 2 or 3, I'm going to reach out again. And then again, this sort of depends on how your leads flow, but generally I'm going to reach out via email and start to kind of give that nurturing process and help me to automate at scale. Can't really scale a direct message in Instagram or a message, an iMessage in, or a messenger message in Facebook. So those kind of like social media messaging platforms, sometimes it can be hard for me to really sort of automate the follow-up. And even in day 2, I need to start to create that automation. Now, if you're working those social media channels and you're super active on it, you should absolutely make sure that you're going and following up until you kind of get them into sort of your more scalable channel. So go back through those messages. If they haven't responded to you, go ahead and hit them up again at that day 2, day 3. But by day 3, I'm sort of trying to funnel them into my email automation process. And then, of course, I want them in my CRM because I want to be able to email and I want to be able to call them on the phone. I think calling on the phone is so often neglected, but it can be super powerful because it doesn't necessarily happen that often. If you are fortunate enough to get an address, direct mail is another opportunity like that, to drop them a card, drop them a thank you note, drop them a personal note. Again, no one ever does that. And so you're really going to stand out and differentiate yourself if you do that. So as we're going through this flow, I would always put them in my call list and devote some time during the day to just going through and calling the folks on my list and making that connection there as well. So I'm going to do that on day 3. I'm going to also do that on day 7. By day 7, I'm starting to create some distance and probably disconnect in a couple ways. One, they could in 7 days simply forget that they actually inquired with us, and so that causes a problem. In 7 days, they could potentially have found another solution or gotten distracted with some other priority, and it's not a priority anymore. So by day 7, because of this distance, and it sounds like not a very long time, I don't want to assume that they're not interested, but I want to change the way that I communicate. So by day 7, I'm starting to include some content and some value. I want to, in the day 7 email, I want to either talk about some other things that we're doing, the way that we're serving clients, so they get an understanding of where we could add some value, or simply adding in or delivering some content that maybe even just shows them a little bit of a DIY approach to what they're trying to do. So you in your industry, your contacts are going to have to kind of think what that content is. But as of day 7, I'm starting to give sort of value added content, non-sales, value added content to say, hey, here's something that might help you, or here's something that I saw that you might be interested in, or here is a way to kind of do what you were asking me about, or here's an example of how we've done it for another client. Again, value added content. Day 14, so now I'm on a kind of a weekly tempo here. Again, I'm going to put some more content into day number 14. Or I've tested this as well, and sometimes this is just as valuable. Stop the content for a second, and in day 14, I'm going to do a super, can't say that enough, short email that just says, hey, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't miss each other. Are you still interested in setting up a time to talk? So again, one sentence, or even it could be just as simple, I've done this as well. Hey, just checking in. Are you still interested in talking? ? Again, make it super simple, make it super personal, and you can, again, apply that. Now you're at week 2, and you kind of break up the flow. Then as we go into week number 3, at day 21-ish, again, we're trying to do that content, because at day 21, week 3, because of the distance, we're actually starting to get them conditioned to be more of a long-term nurture prospect. And so that actually, we want to start to condition them what they're going to experience in my long-term nurturing campaign. So about day 21, I'm actually just going to, through automation, going to transition them into my lead nurturing process. So at this point, I've tried to connect with them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 different times, done some phone calls along here. I've given them some good, valuable information. At this point, I'm going to transition them into my long-term strategy so that I can fill that database, stock that pond for the future. Definitely want to stay in contact with them. Any point in the short-term process that you actually get a positive acknowledgement and they want to set up a meeting, or they do set up a meeting, or you get them on the call and you're talking to them, you should break that short-term process, and then you should determine, kind of handle them manually as you move them through your sales process. And then at any point, if they go to sleep on you, become non-responsive, you can push them back into that long-term nurturing program. So that's the short-term program. Now going into the long-term program, I'm going to start to use as many channels as I can, channels that I'm already supporting with my digital marketing strategy, because at this point, they're kind of like just a brand new sort of remarketing sort of lead, or they're just part of your audience at this point. So you want to get them into that audience building system. But it's still going to have a long-term follow-up. If you're sophisticated enough, you can actually segment these as follow-ups, and you can actually talk to them slightly different. But the program is going to be kind of the same. So for long-term follow-up, I'm thinking about content. I'm creating content that I know will be valuable to those folks. So I'm thinking about other problems they're trying to solve, other challenges that they have. It may not even be associated with my business or what I sell, but I want to add value, and I want to create some diversity in that content, so that they don't just say, oh, all Bill does is pound, 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 website, right? I want to talk about some other things. Let's talk about, challenges that they're having with employees, with training, with prioritizing their own things, other marketing channels, whatever the case is, whatever you sell. Try to think about all those other problems in that potential client's world that you can realistically and have some value to add back to them. So we're going to be building content. We're going to try to, again, most of this is going to be in our email flow, but during that flow, we're going to try to encourage them to get into our social media audience as well. So we're going to encourage them to like and follow us in different social media channels. We're going to push out and show them examples of what we're doing in other places on the web, so that they'll hopefully subscribe. So if you're on our email newsletter, you know that we often push you out to YouTube and encourage you to subscribe there, because again, it gives us just one more channel to be able to talk to you and be a part of your day-to-day workflow. So social media, we're going to try to get them into our social media channels. Of course, the email list, we want to have some regular, consistent, and frequent pushing out of emails. Generally, I encourage once a week, but some people feel that that's too much. But you definitely want to talk to them via email. It's one of the most efficient channels. It's easy to automate, and it's something that people are pretty comfortable with either taking, storing, looking at later. It's amazing how many of our emails that we actually push out, maybe it was for 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we'll actually see a conversion on that particular email weeks later. So somebody obviously stored it, saved it, or maybe it got forwarded to them, and they acted on that email weeks after the email was actually sent. So don't neglect that. Of course, you're wanting to automate everything that you can in here as you're working through the channels. Again, focusing on social media, your email list. Also, occasionally, and I would, again, this is based on your tempo and how you manage your call list, but I would take these people and either once a month or once a quarter, I would insert them back into your call list and have a reach out and leave a voicemail so that they hear your voice. They know you're real. They know you're intentional about wanting to connect with them. Don't just put them on the email list and just forget them and make email do all of the work. Try to, again, be encountering them through as many touch points as possible. And then last but not least, and all of this, kind of the inner glue to all of this and the mechanism by which to make it work, is to make sure that long term they are dropped into your CRM database, and then there is a structure that actually puts people through this long-term follow-up workflow. So hopefully this has been a little introduction to how you can build a very basic framework for both short-term and long-term follow-up. If you have any questions, definitely leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you're doing, maybe things that I missed or things that you're doing that are particularly effective both in short and long-term follow-up processes. I'd love to get in. I love building these systems. Love to get into that discussion with you in the comments. Again, if this was helpful, please give us a thumbs up on the video. That helps us so much, gives us great feedback, and then of course allows the video to go further and do more for our audiences. And then if you want to make sure that you don't miss any of these, we'd love for you to subscribe. Just hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell, the notification, and then you will know every time we post a new video or go live, which happens about once a week. Until next time, I encourage you to take a look at what you're doing for follow-up short-term and long-term and ask us any questions, and we'll see you next week.